Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 570 for January 28th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brennan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for this episode. I'm very excited to dive into it. If you're watching us on the YouTube, you'll see that we are not alone. It's our first guest of the year here on the show. Very, very excited to bring on awards editor over at InSessionFilm.com, Brian Rowe. Brian, thanks for joining us for this episode, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. There's, of course, a pretty important reason that you're here.
Oh, yeah.
A little thing called the Oscars are happening pretty soon, and they released their nominations, and everyone agreed. There was no discourse. No backlash whatsoever. Everyone loved the nominations this year. So this should be a quick conversation, I think.
Oh, JD, you are so fluent in sarcasm. I love it.
Look, it's absolutely wild. We definitely have to talk about the reaction to the reaction. Like it was.
Oh, yeah. It's a reaction section going on here.
If you were not at Sundance, and our lovely friend Brian was at Sundance, so thankfully he was spared from the discourse. That was an absolute dumpster fire this last week. We will talk about it.
Yeah.
We will get into why the conversation around the Oscar nominations this year is utterly insane. But before we get to that, let's actually talk about the Oscar nominations. Let's start there. Okay? let's get into that. That might help explain.
This will be the precursor. Yeah, this is how we
conversation.
lift the curtain a little bit to reveal where this discourse may ultimately lie.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. And Brian, we'll start with you. What were your thoughts on this year's crop of Oscar nominees?
So overall, I'm pretty happy with the nominees. I was a little sad on Oscar nominations morning because we didn't get too many surprises. Usually we get 2 or 3 like kind of big shockers somewhere in there. And listening to the nominations live, I was just like, yep, that sounds right. And especially like best actor, best supporting actor, like we were just getting a lot of names we've seen often this season. So it was kind of dull in that respect. Like the biggest surprise acting nominee, I would say, was America Ferrera for Barbie, because she only got into Critics' Choice and nowhere else. But I've been predicting her since October. Like I always kind of
ahead
thought,
of the game. Nice work. Yeah.
I always kind of thought she had a good chance being in such a big kind of awards player, and she's got that amazing monologue scene. I was like, a lot of people are going to be watching Barbie.
Sure.
When she didn't get the SAG nomination, I went, oh, maybe not, but it happened. But even that one, I wasn't like, wow. And Annette Bening for Nyad, some people were thinking she could get in, and it made sense. She's kind of
very Academy-like.
She's kind of the veteran of the group, and I was like, are they just going to nominate like women in their 30s? Like, I feel like they're going to give us something else. And so, they went with Annette Bening. But like, you look at that Best Picture lineup, it's the same 10 at PGA, at Producers Guild, and it's pretty solid. Like, some years we get a couple in there that's like, really, that's a Best Picture nominee. Like, I would say maybe the weakest there is like something like Maestro, which even I think is better than other people say it is. So I'm pretty happy with the Best Picture lineup. And I mean, director, we can talk about, as obviously people are upset about that. But like Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall is a fantastic nomination. She did a great job on that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a bummer Greta Gerwig didn't get in. I would have liked 3 women nominated in Best Director. I think like 3 were worthy. Triet, Gerwig, and Celine Song for Past Lives. But maybe another 50 years from now, we can get 3 women in and 2 men. That would be nice. but yeah, like the technical categories, screenplay categories are really great. I mean, my biggest disappointment, I was like rooting for Greta Lee, Past Lives. That's one of my favorite performances of the last few years. It's a very quiet performance.
Yeah.
She got in a Critics' Choice and Golden Globe. So I'm like, there's a shot. Like, it was very unlikely, but I was like preparing myself to jump around the room if they said her name. As soon as they said Annette Bening, I said, it's over.
Yeah, it's not happening. It's not happening.
I was like, okay, Bening.
There are just certain types of performances and like forms of artistic cinematic expression that the Academy just seems to favor. And Annette Bening in that movie is kind of one of those. And especially knowing that she is a veteran, like you're talking about.
Yeah. And I was not surprised by Margot Robbie missing. I think a lot of people were, because she got in everywhere. She got in at Critics' Choice, Golden Globes, SAG, and BAFTA. She got in a BAFTA, I'm pretty sure. I mean, she's basically got in everywhere. But, you know, Barbie's a tricky beast of a movie. It's kind of like a summer kind of entertainment. And I was like, some voters aren't going to put Margot Robbie or Greta Gerwig at the top of their list. So they're both kind of vulnerable. Whereas supporting actor and supporting actress weren't as competitive. So like like Ryan Gosling was always safe. He's been he's been in the top 2 or 3 the whole time. And then supporting actress has been all over the place this season. So I was like, Ferrera could be slot 5. Like, we'll see. And it happened. So it makes sense to me why 2 of the big players of Barbie missed and then a couple others got in. But I want everyone to remember Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig were Oscar nominated for this movie.
For Barbie, yeah. Just not in the categories people wanted them to.
Robbie in producing and Gerwig in screenwriting.
Yeah.
And adapted screenplay.
Yeah. And again, Brian, I want to prepare you because you missed much of the discourse.
I was watching
that
Sunday.
Isn't good enough for some people.
That's not good enough.
They've heard that. They hear you. Yes.
Yeah.
Both of them are Oscar nominated, and boy, they did not want to hear that. Oh my goodness.
Well, like, you know, Past Lives, my favorite film of the year. If Greta Lee was a producer on Past Lives and she had gotten a nomination in producing for that film in Best Picture, it would make me feel better about her not making Best Actress. Yeah. So it's like, well, they both got in.
Because her work and her commitment to that film in some way is still being honored. There's just two variations of that recognition.
I think my issue with that idea, that pushback, if you will, is that it degrades whether they are aware of this or not. But that kind of pushback degrades a Best Screenplay nomination, which that's a big category.
It's a big deal.
Like, that's a big deal. And also Best Picture, kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, why are we undermining those just because you want her in for actress, just because you want her in for directing? And I understand wanting that, but why are we undermining the value and the integrity of screenplay and picture? It makes no sense whatsoever.
It's creating an agenda around specific categories that don't need to have that. And it's inadvertently ranking categories and creating a hierarchy as if to suggest getting a Best Director nomination is better than getting a Best Screenplay nomination.
A Best Picture nomination?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Best Picture. That's not good enough, Brendan. I need Margot for actress.
Well, now, I will say personally, while I'm not surprised that Margot missed for Best Actress, I am a little disappointed because I genuinely think it is the best performance of her career. I do think it's that good. I believe it was one of my 5 when we did our InSession Film Awards. But at the same time, I'm not surprised that she missed out. I just think it's unfortunate that given this narrative, we're forgetting about someone like America Ferrera being nominated. Like people are now being asked. Like Michelle Yeoh was even asked, "What do you feel about the Barbie snubs?" It's like it's becoming the new.
It's
asking Scorsese
Michelle
about
Yeoh?
Marvel. Yeah, I think she was on The View or something, and they asked her for her thoughts on Greta and Margot being snubbed in their respective categories. Like this kind of narrative and this kind of form of, I guess, like artistic support is becoming the new. Like, ask Scorsese about a Marvel movie once again. It's turning into that again.
Well, people like controversy. They like stirring things up. Like what out of the Oscar nominations can we turn a story into? Oh, Barbie missed in a couple big places. That'll be the story for the next few days.
It got 8 nominations, though. 8.
Yeah.
And people are like, that's not good enough.
If you had asked me a year ago, like, do you think Barbie's going to be an Oscar nominee? I'd be like, maybe costume.
Maybe.
Yeah. 8
And now it's
nominations.
like 8's not enough.
And now I will say, if you want to direct your anger at Margot missing for Best Actress, I think there is validation there, but it's being misdirected because
yeah.
I think there's more than a fair conversation to be had about Benning taking that spot over Margot Robbie. And I don't look, Naiad is a perfectly fine movie. It achieves what it sets out to, and it is very, very okay. And I think those performances are good. I don't think they're Oscar worthy myself. And I don't think they need to be in a 5 here. Jodie Foster, maybe we can certainly talk about that category.
Sure.
But Annette Bening, I don't think should be in over Margot Robbie. I don't think she should be in over a Greta Lee, for example, as well. I mean, I could probably think of a few more. Kaylee Spaney for Priscilla. I wouldn't take Bening over that either. Like there are certainly
Kaylee Spaney was my favorite female performance of the year.
Like I don't, and again, this isn't because we're talking about the Oscars. I have to be crystal clear about this.
Yeah,
I'm going to end up swearing before this conversation's over. To be crystal clear, this is not an anti-Bening sentiment. I think when we're talking about these performances, I just think there are others that deserve to be in over her, including Margot Robbie, including Kaylee Spaney, including Greta Lee, and others. I don't even know if Bening would be in a 10 for me for Best Actress.
Same.
So if you want to have that conversation, fine. We can have that conversation.
Absolutely.
But that wasn't the conversation being had. It was the Oscars, the Academy is throw in whatever adjective you want because Ken got in and Barbie didn't. That's the conversation.
That has been the framing of it. You're right.
Yeah, and Best Actor, and especially if we're looking at this from a competitive perspective, and boy, do I want to talk about the whole ethos of turning art into sports. That is going to be a big part of this conversation.
Oh, how coincidental we're doing this during the Lions game right now too.
But if we're talking about this from a competitive perspective, you're talking about two very different categories, two races that have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
So comparing them makes no sense whatsoever. Brian, am I losing my mind here?
I don't understand the concept of, oh my God, they nominated Ken and not Barbie, because Best Actress was just so much more competitive of a category than Supporting Actor ever was. And I do feel like, as great as Margot Robbie is in Barbie, like the big flashy performance in the movie is Ryan Gosling. Like that is like a big, very funny performance. And I mean, Robbie has some wonderful scenes in that movie, and dramatic scenes and humorous scenes.
Yeah.
But like the scene stealer is Ryan Gosling, and then America Ferrera has that dynamite monologue scene. And like, you know, Robbie doesn't really get like a lot of those kinds of moments, so it makes sense.
It's more nuanced. Yeah, I mean, it's not a quiet performance, but it almost is quiet by comparison to those two performances that were nominated. And we sometimes know the Academy likes loudness, they instantly gravitate towards
like
that.
Annette Bening. I mean, it totally makes sense to me. It's a physical transformation. It's a very physical performance. She's in the water, and she's in her mid 60s, and she's bringing this real life person to the screen in a way only a handful of actors at her age could do. Right. There's only so many people who could have played that role. And I just feel like I think it got very close. I bet Robbie was 6th, and it just was like just edged out there. I would have personally, as much as I like her in the movie, I did not understand why Carey Mulligan and Maestro had to get in everywhere. That was kind of weird to me.
I think if anything, well, there's two things for that. On one hand, I feel like awards bodies, especially the Academy, they tend to respond to movies when there's this almost like the shift in character perspective in a movie when all of a sudden it becomes someone else's movie all of a sudden. And in many ways, Carey Mulligan becomes the star
She's
of
the
Maestro.
star of
in
that
The
third
second
act.
half, yeah.
yeah. And that transition tends to work really well for a lot of voting members in various bodies. And maybe that's part of it. And that's not to undermine Carey Mulligan's performance. I think she's in many ways the best thing about Maestro.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, you know, like for a while, I feel like we as a critics group were sort of doubting Maestro as a potential player as the awards season continued. But then it actually got a lot of love at the Academy. And it kind of makes sense. It goes back to the kind of like the naiad of it all. It's the kind of movie that the Academy would respond to. And so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised to see Bradley Cooper getting as well represented as he was, even though some of the evidence leading up to the Oscar nominations almost suggested that maybe we shouldn't be putting as much stock into Maestro as we are.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I just think the movie itself isn't as strong as pretty much every
I'm with
other
you.
film
Yeah.
in Best Picture. And so I'm like, Mulligan could have missed.
Yeah. But for who though? Like that's, I mean, I could certainly come up with a couple of nominations myself. I just don't know, given the race that's out there, who would get in over her. Like Benning over Robbie surprises me a little bit, but she was campaigning her ass off, so I'm not too surprised that she gets in. You know, and as much as I love Natalie Portman, she never had a chance in hell.
No.
Kaylee Spaney, again, never really had a chance here. So, I mean, I'm with you, Brendan. I think she is the best thing about Maestro. I do think she's genuinely awesome in that third act. But even going back to something like that opera scene when the camera just simply lingers on her, to me, that should be her Oscar clip. We know it's not. It's going to be the Thanksgiving fight because everything's got to be a huge fight.
Yeah.
But that is one of her best moments in that film. And it's absolutely striking. So I'm certainly okay with that nomination. I would certainly prefer it over Benning in that case.
Yeah. And going back to our overall feelings on the Oscar nominations, I found that I was being very cynical when they were first announced, and I think it comes down to two reasons. On one hand, a lot of us were genuinely surprised when the Golden Globe nominations first came out because that was a genuinely great crop of nominees and a lot of surprises there for sure.
Great job,
Yeah,
They're
so
better.
it's possible that
I agree.
Yeah, I think they did.
I don't know if I was going to say it, but I'm glad you did.
Well, that's kind of where I was going with it. I wasn't going to use those words, but I will say it. I think they were a better crop of nominees.
I agree.
But I think maybe that spoiled us a little bit into hoping for something a bit surprising and a bit more representative with the Oscars, which we didn't quite get. But in some ways, I found myself also focusing on those negatives for maybe even a really good reason. And it just goes to show how great of a year 2023 was for film.
Yeah.
That the fact that we have all of these quote unquote snubs to talk about just goes to show how much depth there was of great talent, whether it be on the acting front or those behind the camera. I think that's in many ways a great problem to have. So the fact that we have some things to complain about, I think in some ways is kind of a good thing in a way that the year was just this strong and we had so many great things to talk about.
Yeah, the year was so strong they couldn't find room for All of Us Strangers, which is ridiculous.
I know.
Well, now okay, now there are
That's
genuine
sad.
things. There are genuine
Oh,
things I have
man.
written down here to be really upset about.
Yeah.
Movies like All of Us Strangers, like not even
That
getting
should have
one
been an
sing-
Oscar nomination.
at least in something. But even a movie like Ferrari got nothing. Priscilla, and when it comes to some tech categories, Saltburn, yeah. Well, John Wick Chapter 4, not even in the tech side of things. So there's some genuine things to be upset about. Maestro getting an original screenplay nomination, like that was kind of a strange one for me. Killers of the Flower Moon missing adapted screenplay, which was very surprising.
Yeah.
But as you said, Brian, you look at the 10 nominees for Best Picture, that is a more than solid crop of nominees. That is worth celebrating. And it's also worth celebrating just how many first-time nominees we have this year.
Right.
Many of whom were kind of a long time coming for certain people, like Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt and Coleman Domingo, Sterling K. Brown. That was actually kind of a nice surprise for American Fiction.
Yeah.
And of course, newcomers like Lily Gladstone and Davine Joy Randolph, Danielle Brooks, Celine Song. There's a lot to celebrate there.
Jeffrey Wright.
Jeffrey
long
Wright.
overdue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like there is a lot to be thrilled about for sure. And that's why circling it back to Best Picture, I think there's an argument to be made. This is an all-time lineup for Best Picture.
Sure.
This is quite great. I agree with you. Maestro is the only film of these 10 that's outside of my top 20. I don't even have it in a top 50. The rest of these films, though, are in my top 25. 8 of the 10 are in my personal top 20, and 6 of them are in my top 10. Like, I love this crop of nominees. I think this is absolutely terrific. So I'm glad that they stuck with the PGA 10. I think that was the right call there, unless they wanted to remove Maestro. I wouldn't have complained if they did. But knowing that there's still some love out there for Maestro, I'm perfectly okay with it. I still like the film on the whole. But yeah, this is a really, really great crop of Best Picture nominees. And you're right, Brendan. I think because there were other elements, other crafts that were complementary to how excellent those 10 are for Best Picture, that when you get some of these, what could be labeled as aggressively mediocre nominees, it just stands out like a sore thumb.
That's true.
You know, I've already talked about Annette Bening. I don't need to go into that more. But another one for me is original score. I have no idea what the music branch is doing. They clearly, and I've argued this for years, they clearly do not care. They don't care. They really don't. The only thing that keeps them up at night as far as here's what I'm voting for is, well, if I don't vote for my friend, how is he going to react? Because that is the only reason John Williams is here. I love John Williams. And this is maybe what's most frustrating to me, even outside the whole Barbie discourse. They have turned the GOAT. They have turned John Williams into one of the villains of this award season. And shame on them for doing so. Shame on them for doing so. He should not have been nominated for that score. Again, perfectly fine. Aggressively fine. That's as far as that score goes. When it comes at the heels of leaving off Daniel Pemberton, and of course he was always an outside shot, but you know, the great Joe Hisaishi, and we don't know how many more scores he's going to give us, especially with Miyazaki. They might have plans to give us more, who knows? But what if this was the last opportunity to recognize him and his great career? They completely botched that opportunity. And for what? American Fiction, the score to American Fiction, I do really like it. I think it's good. I wouldn't put it in a 5, but it is very good. And again, John Williams gets in here because he is besties with his peers, and they have to vote for him.
And it's a score that's very nostalgia baity, right?
And it's nostalgia baity.
Yeah.
And it like he gets in because the music branch doesn't care. They don't. They need to hand that off. This is the one category that should, I know, like, I don't know, this is obviously.
I love passionate JD when it comes to music, and I'm the musician of the podcast.
This is my favorite category.
Yeah.
And I think they should hand that off to me and a select few others that actually do give a rip about this category, because there are so many great scores that come out each year. And this, again, complimenting the whole idea of Best Picture and how great it was. This was an astounding year for musical scores. Astounding
it really
year.
Was.
I have my 5. I could have done another crop of nominees, even at the InSession Film Awards.
If you're gonna have a nominee for Best Original Score like American Fiction, which almost feels like this out of the box pick of sorts, I mean, why not nominate the score for Past Lives? Like that. That's a much more tender score. Yeah,
I completely agree. Again, they don't care. All they want to do is vote for, their friends, and it's utterly bothersome to me. Like they clearly don't give a rip,
well,
and I'd love for them to actually take it serious from.
Well, I think it's about more than just they want to vote for their friends. They want to vote for the legend. I mean, what is he, 91, 92? I mean, I think he's at such a level of, like, he's in his 90s. He's on, like, his 53rd nomination.
He's
They
kind of
just
like
see his name and they check it off. Kind of.
he's kind of like the Diane Warren of composers,
which I think is much more frustrating. I am so sick of the annual Diane Warren nomination for a movie nobody's heard of. I'm done. I think that is. I'm beyond.
I'm so with you, Brian. I'm so with you.
That is way more upsetting to me than the John Williams thing. I'm like, every year it's some stupid movie nobody's seen. It like dropped quietly on Hulu in March, and it's an Oscar nominee over films like Saltburn and All of Us Strangers and so many better movies.
I agree. Again, the music branch, they don't know what they're doing. And like I get honoring John Williams, especially at his age. We don't know how many more of these that we're going to get, but there's nothing that qualifies that work of art as an Oscar nomination. It just doesn't. Yeah. It's a perfectly fine score. There, and you have to draw a line in the sand. Like, what are we doing here? Are we going to take this seriously and nominate those that are deserving, especially because you might have a nomination for someone that has never had it before. Again, I go back to Joe Hisaishi. It's the same thing. Like that's a man that also deserves to have the same recognition for the same reasons. Yeah. And you've nominated him 0 times. You've nominated the great John Williams a bajillion times. You don't have to do it a bajillion.
They're trying to get him to the Walt Disney had 59. And I think
that's what they're trying to do.
And is this for Indiana Jones? It's 53 or 54.
Jones.
So Williams needs like 6-ish more nominations to break the Walt Disney record. So they got to nominate him.
Maybe that's what they're trying to do.
That's what we're doing.
Back to agendas. We're back to agendas once again.
And to circle it back to the discourse, because I'm clearly not the only one passionate about this. He has become John Williams. That nomination anyway. I think we still all recognize he's the GOAT. But that nomination has become one of the villains of this award season.
Yeah.
People are extremely. I'm telling you, I know you missed it. I know you missed it, Brian. But
you lucky man missing all of this.
I'm so incredibly envious of you for missing this. But he did become that.
John Williams is an all-timer legend. He cannot be a villain of an award season.
But he has. That's what he's become. And it's
not John Williams doing it.
It's a shame on the music branch for doing that.
He could fart out his last movie score and they can nominate it and I'll be fine.
Fair enough. Look, and again, like it's the same thing with like I love John Williams. He's the greatest for a reason. Yeah. I just don't think it's a deserved nomination. And I'm not one to just hand them out like cookies for no reason. Like he's not a child. He doesn't need it.
Last year, he got nominated for The Fabelmans, which is a movie I loved, but I didn't even hear a score in that movie.
I've seen, and that's one that I'll kind of defend. I love that music.
Like I was
it blends in so much. It blends in so well that it kind of becomes complementary to the experience as a whole. That I really did appreciate. It's like when sometimes the best edited movies of any year are the ones where you barely notice any editing happening. Right. And I would feel the same way about John Williams's work in The Fabelmans. Is that it feels like it's all like universally and unanimously fitting in together.
So what do we think his last really good Oscar nominated score was? Probably before Lincoln 2012. That was a good score.
I mean, I will actually defend his score for The Force Awakens, and it's primarily because I think that one is doing a good job kind of blending the nostalgia baity side by also bringing us some new compelling melodies to support
that I think are just as good. Like that
Ray's theme I think is beautiful. Yeah. So I think he's kind of doing both things there, which is actually kind of difficult. It's how you time the nostalgia to really trigger us in the right way, but also deliver us some new musical motifs that give that movie its own identity. And that's kind of a hard thing to balance. And I think he did a good job there.
I agree.
So has he missed a nomination for any movie in the last 10 years?
That is a great question.
I think he did the score for The Post, Steven Spielberg's The Post in 2017, which I think kind of like The Fabelmans had a very kind of quiet score. I don't think he got nominated for that because that movie
one he may have missed.
He only got nominated for.
No, he did not. That was Thomas Newman, I think.
Okay. He didn't do Ready Player One. He didn't work on West Side Story. So I think in the last decade, I think the only score he's done that did not get an Oscar nomination was The Post. I think everything else has been recognized.
And
Because,
it's a shoo-in. It's a shoo-in every single time.
So his Oscar-nominated scores of the past 10 years or so Adventures of Tintin, Warhorse, Lincoln, then The Book Thief, all 3 Star Wars films in this new trilogy, The Fabelmans and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
That's everything, except for The Post. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, again, I love John Williams. It's not an anti-John Williams rant. It's an that score on its own terms was perfectly fine, but it wasn't deserving of an Oscar nomination, and it took away from a Daniel Pemberton who really deserved to be there.
Yeah. Oh, well, there was also the BFG. He did score that.
Oh,
and
right, BFG.
And the fact that we all forgot about that, I think, just proves how forgettable that movie was.
That is the most forgettable Steven Spielberg movie.
100%.
That's bottom 3 Spielberg, if you ask me. It's really unfortunate.
Not good. Okay, we could move away from that. Thank you for giving me my platform, though. What else do we want to talk about? Should we go back to the acting categories? I know that there was some conversation for the supporting categories as well. Do we want to go there?
Well, yeah, before we get there, I wanted to say in Best Actor, something that did delight me was, I was pretty impressed by DiCaprio in Killers of the Flower Moon, but he's been nominated a lot throughout the decades.
Yeah.
And I do feel like Coleman Domingo was deserving of a nomination for Rustin, even though the movie was underperforming throughout the whole award season in every other category. So it would have been much easier and predictable for them to push Coleman Domingo aside because Rustin isn't everyone's favorite and just give DiCaprio another Best Actor nomination for Killers. And I was kind of surprised and delighted that DiCaprio missed, and they got Coleman Domingo in there for his first nomination for a performance I think people should see, and I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I still would have preferred Andrew Scott, but
too,
I do not I don't mind that nomination at all.
Yeah, I don't know how Andrew Scott was going to fit in there. There was just no room, but he should have been in there somewhere.
I mean, it should. I mean, Koji Yakusho should have been in there somewhere.
Yep, that's another good one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then people say, I've seen people say, they should just make it 7 to 10 nominees per category, and then we'll all be happy. I'm like, no, don't do that. That would kind of defeat.
You're just turning into a scapegoat.
Convolute this.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like Coleman Domingo in that film. I love him as an actor. He had a great year on the whole.
Yeah.
So maybe that played a part of it as well. But yeah, it's a great performance. And again, fine movie, but he's very good. And I don't mind him being in here, even if I did prefer Scott. Those 5 there, I honestly, and maybe this is a hot take, but the one I would have removed isn't even Domingo. It would have been Bradley Cooper. But I didn't say that. I didn't say that out loud.
Okay, I'll say it. He would be the one I'd remove as well.
But then Cooper, he would only have 11 nominations now, not 12.
He's the new John Williams. Yeah.
He is.
Isn't that insane? So his first nomination at the Oscars was for Silver Linings Playbook 11 years ago in Best Actor. And between acting and producing, he now has 12 Oscar nominations. He has never won.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's in 3rd place to win Best Actor behind Giamatti and Murphy.
Yeah.
So I'm like, he's not winning screenplay. He's definitely not winning picture. So he is going to, if an outside of a crazy shock, he is going 0 for 12 after this March. It's just, that's kind of insane.
It's kind of insane, but he will win someday. We know he will.
Look, Leo got there. Cooper will get there, okay?
That's the narrative that's happening. The reaction for DiCaprio finally winning an Oscar. What was that in 2017? I think it was
2016 for The Revenant.
For The Revenant, yeah. That same response from us and audiences will be the same when Bradley Cooper finally wins an Oscar.
And I can't wait to be there to defend it, like I did for DiCaprio.
I like DiCaprio in The Revenant. I think he's good in that movie.
I think the backlash against that performance is wholly unwarranted, but we'll leave that conversation for another time. Yeah, I do look forward to Cooper getting that Oscar finally. But yeah, I agree that 5 there is very good.
And then you mentioned the supporting categories. You know, one of the bummers for me, also, we haven't really talked about May December, I think, is a terrific film. It was on my top 10.
Same.
And it got into original screenplay.
Yeah.
Which made it an Oscar nominee. So that's great.
Yeah.
But like Charles Melton is incredible in that movie. And it was really weird to see him kind of be the initial semi front runner of supporting actor. He won the first couple like smaller prizes. He won some critics prizes in like December. And then like after Critics' Choice and Golden Globes, he was gone. It's like, okay, interesting.
And it's sad,
he I wish Charles Melton had a little bit more.
I agree.
Traction.
That was disappointing. That was very disappointing.
Yeah.
And, who do they put in? I mean, I guess over him they put in Sterling K. Brown, American Fiction. That's a really great choice. And Willem Dafoe missed for Poor Things. He's very memorable in that.
I'll be honest. If a supporting actor was going to be nominated for Poor Things, I kind of wish it would have been Willem Dafoe over Mark Ruffalo. Heck, even Christopher Abbott, I would have probably preferred as well.
Really? I love Ruffalo in that movie.
Or even Jared Carmichael. He was actually my number 2. I loved him in that. I mixed on Mark Ruffalo in that.
So
movie.
if you had a Best Supporting Actor of the Year in Poor Things top 5, Ruffalo wouldn't even get in there.
He'd struggle. He'd struggle. I thought his shtick got a little old. But again, that's more of a subjective thing on me than it is maybe how it functions in the movie. And I'm willing to admit that.
I'm with you, Brian. I think he's great. I very much prefer him over Dafoe. Dafoe isn't really asked to do much. Like he has the makeup, he has the fart bubbles. Gotta love those. But that's more of a direction thing than it is a performance thing. From a performance thing, he's very great. I love him in the role, but it's very muted comparatively. Which is why he was never even a consideration for me, even at the InSession Film Awards. I very much prefer Ruffalo and out of those two. And honestly, it's not even close as far as I'm concerned. I'm even a little taken aback that Dafoe was even in the conversation, given the rules and the context that the Oscars tends to vote by, outside of the memorable looking aesthetic of him, which is great. I don't know what that performance brings. That
pain,
people would
suffering,
be
fatherhood, devastation. There's a lot of things
again,
I can add.
All of that is
performance based. It's performance based,
but
dude.
it's all muted. Like it's reserved.
Exactly. And that's what makes it good.
internalized.
That's what makes it better.
And look, I'm not saying that it's bad. Again, I think he is good in the movie, but that's not how the Oscars tends to vote.
Oh, no, I
opened
agree
this
with that,
conversation by talking about that. And that's why I'm surprised that he was even in. Now, maybe at the end of the day, that is why he missed, though.
Maybe.
Because it's not flashy. It is kind of all internalized.
Yeah. That's why I prefer it, honestly.
But what surprised me about Dafoe's omission there was that he got the last 2 nominations he got at the Oscars were for the film's only nomination. He got a Best Supporting Actor nomination for The Florida Project. That was the only nomination for that movie. And then the next year, he gets Best Actor for At Eternity's Gate, which was that film's only nomination. And then he shows up in a memorable supporting performance in a movie people love that gets 11 nominations, and he can't crack the 5 supporting actor. That just felt weird to me.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Yeah.
It is a fair point. And maybe it's because they really like these 5. I mean, one has to assume though
it's all about timing.
Probably very close.
I mean, it's timing. It depends on how busy and how stacked those categories are for that given year. And there were a lot of great performances in this particular category that didn't even make. I mean, Charles Melton missing is just that is sad. Yeah. That is so sad. He really should be there.
It's possible they didn't want to, although this is a very different context, but maybe they didn't want to. For the same reasons they didn't want to double nominate Sandra Huller, maybe they just wanted to leave out or just choose one of the Poor Things guys.
I don't think that's how it works, though. I don't think they're like in a room going, okay, we're only going to nominate one of the 2 guys from Poor Thing. I think it's just a matter of like.
I think you're right, Brian. It's so easy to assume that maybe there is like a hidden motive sometimes because of how it sometimes works. But I get it.
If the collective, and I understand these are individual ballots, but if enough people have that thought process, these are the results you get.
Okay.
Because again. that's why I bring up Sandra Huller, because that could have been their mentality when checking off their nominations list here. Well, I'm not going to put Huller in supporting because I know I'm going to have her in Best Actress. I'm not going to have Dafoe in supporting actor because I'm going to have one of the Poor Things guys already. Like, and if enough people do that, here you
I think sometimes the problem is like Academy voters, not all of them, but some are just not watching all of the movies. Like I think they're just like looking at like the 10 Best Picture nominees. And I mean, you look at the acting categories, most of the people who got in are in Best Picture nominees. I mean, you have Danielle Brooks in The Color Purple, and that was that film's only nomination. But like, you know,
still,
like, are
still
they
a popular film?
Are they watching May December? Are they watching Saltburn? I thought Rosamund Pike was incredible in Saltburn, and you know Julianne Moore for May December, and there's some wonderful work. And I'm like, maybe they're just not watching all of these films.
I think it's a great point, and I think that's why we felt maybe a little bit spoiled when we saw the Golden Globe nominations, because it actually seemed like that voting body saw a lot more movies than usual. Yeah.
Which is weird because The Zone of Interest is still making its release. By the time they were voting, that film hadn't even come out yet.
Yeah.
But they had seen that one. Like, it's weird what they pick and choose.
Well,
to
also
see or not see.
but also at the Golden Globes, like the acting categories have 6 slots, not 5. That also helps. I mean, Andrew Scott might have gotten slot 6 in Best Actor there for All of Us Strangers. And so at the Oscars, when it's just 5, a couple people in each category are they're not going to make it in. And so when it's not a huge player in Best Picture, you get the occasional naiad here or The Color Purple, but for the most part, your movie has to get into Best Picture to really be a big contender,
to qualify almost, which is a weird thing.
Which wasn't always the case. You look back on Oscar nominations from 30, 40, 50 years ago, and you will see random movie nominations in like the supporting acting categories that you've never heard of in your life.
And I love that. At the same time, too, that was probably back before the 10 nominees even, were a thing. So back when we still had 5 nominees for Best Picture, it allowed that, I don't know if illusion's the right word, but that perspective of kind of spreading the wealth a little bit and recognizing things that aren't just Best Picture nominations. So now that we've extended to 10 once again, it almost seems like, hey, we've got the 10 best movies of the year. Let's nominate things from all 10 of those movies. And that's basically it.
Can I talk about, because I feel like I've been overly cynical in this conversation.
Which is a rarity for you.
I'm going to get more cynical as we go. I promise you, I will. However, I want to offer a little bit of love to this conversation because there were 2 surprises that I did not anticipate at all. And that is Robot Dreams and Perfect Days. We just reviewed those 2 last week on the show. If you want to go and check out those reviews that Brendan and I did. And in our conversations, we opened up both of those review shows by me talking about how I did not anticipate them getting in here at all. At all. They did not have any precursor momentum whatsoever, especially Robot Dreams. It was just lingering out there in a neon box, hoping, to Brian's point, that people saw it. Clearly they did, because that has not been released yet. Perfect Days hasn't been released yet, at least not here in North America. Yeah. So those getting in was a massive surprise. For as much as I was jaw dropped by the John Williams nomination and that Benning, I had the antithesis reaction to those 2 because I nearly screamed and howled when I saw that Robot Dreams was nominated. I did not anticipate that. It's one of the best films of the year, and one of the reasons that it was such an astounding year for animation. So that was awesome. And of course, Perfect Days getting in, which is Brendan's #1 movie of the year. It was in my top 20 as well. Absolutely adore that film. So those 2 getting in, kudos to the Academy.
Hope Dictions are a thing. Hope Dictions. It's a good.
I love hearing that. Perfect Days was one of my favorite discoveries in the last few weeks. It was in the neon box set, right?
It was.
Perfect Days. Oh my gosh.
And Robot Dreams, they were both in that box.
Yeah. And I mean, Robot Dreams, I think something that helps a movie like that is animated feature. I think every year now has 5 slots, right, for animated feature. And so you'll have your typical like 3 big, animated films of the year that did well at the box office. But then typically each year you get like a kind of a surprise, like 4th or 5th place slot, that a movie that not a lot of people have heard of.
Yeah.
And so after I watched Robot Dreams, I felt pretty good about its chances. It's such a great film.
You're right. Yeah. Every year there's always that one that's like, I didn't even hear about that. Like the triplet of Bellevue from like a couple like a decade ago, I think that was, which I think is a great movie.
2 decades ago, I think. Yeah.
2 decades. Yeah, you're right. That was like 2003, I think.
But like the other one, Nimona. I don't know anything about Nimona. Is it good?
Yep. It's very good.
It's on Netflix, so I'll check it out.
It's very good. It was probably my number 6 personally, but I think it's still very good. I love that nomination getting in there, and along with those other 4, which are great. I was a little saddened, I guess, that Mutant Mayhem didn't get in. I thought that was deserving. Such a distinct animation style that's really great. So that missing was a little disappointing, but at the other side of that coin of Robot Dreams getting in there was just incredible. But I mean, as you noted earlier, Brian, that's why I was so reserved with that one, because you don't know what people are watching.
Yeah.
And that film has not been marketed because it hasn't had any sort of release yet. I don't even know when it's coming out, really. So voters had to just look through it and go, sure, we'll give this one a go. And they watched it, and thank God they did. Because,
and now more people might discover it. I think
exactly.
Every year, I think something that helps, when it comes to the Oscars, that it will get more eyeballs on a movie that people don't really know.
That's why it's worth celebrating any movie getting an Oscar nomination in some way in a category someone might be a little bit passionate about, because it does help spread awareness. Even though we like to complain about a lot of these things, like movies like Anatomy of a Fall might start getting discovered because they're being more popularized in this way. And that is something to be celebrated. Like, if you want to look at it as like a form of marketing in a weird way, I kind of like that.
It matters. That's why the Oscars really matter. I actually sent out a tweet about this earlier today because someone was talking, not just someone, many were talking about the zone of interest and how they're attending screenings that are somewhat packed because it has all of these Oscar nominations to it. And without them, the zone of interest isn't going to get butts in the seats. That's a impossible film to market. It just is. But you sell it on, hey, look at all of these Oscar nominations, and people will go and check it out. And I compared that to Moonlight, because Moonlight comes out, it has a budget of like $2 million, and in its first month in theaters, it only made $7 million. Now, ultimately, it made $65 million worldwide, and almost all of that money came after it was nominated for its Oscars.
Right.
So it does matter, especially for those little films that don't have much of a leg to stand on, especially in terms of a marketing budget, to your point, Brendan. Other than, hey, look at it, look at these Oscar nominations. So it does very much matter.
Coming back from Sundance on the plane, a woman right in front of me was watching past lives on her phone. And I didn't say anything to her, but I'm like, I wonder if she would be watching this if it didn't just get a Best Picture Oscar nomination. I bet that had something to do with it, and that's really cool.
You're absolutely
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah,
100%.
I love that, and it's not even that. A lot of these people will probably walk out of it thinking, it wasn't quite for me. For a lot of these movies, like The Zone of Interest, for instance. But like, let's say you get 10 people who go and see that movie because of its Oscar nominations, and 2 of them walk out really liking it. Those 2 probably wouldn't have gone in the first place. So that still helps in that
way. Then word of mouth, and they tell other people, you have to check this out, and they might be like, what? And they'll say, oh, it got Oscar nominated for Best Picture and Best Director and blah, blah, blah. And they'll be like, oh, okay. And you'll get more people to watch it, which is good.
Absolutely.
All right, Brendan, let's talk about coffee. We need
Nature's medicine.
We love
Nature's medicine.
Oh, it's just the best.
Yeah.
It's also great when you're drinking the best coffee. And that's why we want to talk about Coffee Cult, because they source specialty grade coffee from all over the world.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not familiar with specialty grade coffee, we're talking about the best coffee.
Yes.
This is gourmet, amazing coffee. And if we want to take it a step further, because a lot of coffee companies have specialty grade,
Sure.
Comes in this bag, and the coffee, the greens, a lot of them are great. A lot of them are perfectly natural beans. Some of them, though, are defects. They're not entirely great.
Yeah.
But look, they're not going through there and picking out the bad ones because that's just too much work. We're just roasting what we have. Coffee Cult, on the other hand, does do that. They go through, they take out the defects. They're only roasting the best of the best. And that's why their coffee has these natural, incredible, exotic flavors that don't need sugar, that don't need cream, that don't need a ton of milk. And look, if you want to add a little drop of milk here and there,
add a little body to it, that's
understandable.
fine. But there's no artificial flavors like you get in some of the
artificial
others.
flavors. It's perfectly incredible all on its own because of the type of bean, the special degrade element of it, and also how they roast it. It's just amazing. So you definitely want to check out Coffee Cult. Go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. Use our promo code ISF and you'll get 15% off. Again, that's coffeecult.com. Our code ISF. You got to go check it out. You're going to love this coffee. Again, that's coffeecult.com. All right, let's talk about the InSession Film Store. Brian,
Merch.
we got
merch.
Awesome t-shirts.
We got merch.
And look, we're of course talking about the Oscars on this show. So there's one t-shirt we have to lead off with here.
Oh, you're ruffling the feathers once again, aren't you?
It's so appropriate to the conversation that we're having because this last week, as we've been talking about, as you already know, it's been all kinds of chaos in terms of the Oscar nominations, how people are reacting to them in this sports mentality kind of way.
Yeah.
This happens every year, maybe not to this degree, but it happens every year. The last time we've seen it to this degree was Moonlight and La La Land. And so we have a t-shirt.
We do.
Right now that says the best thing that ever happened to La La Land is that it lost Best Picture to Moonlight. And it's very true. People love Moonlight. It won Best Picture, so they don't have to attack La La Land. They can let that film live in peace. They can let the La La Land fans live in peace as well. Everybody wins. So, that's the spirit of that. You can like Moonlight and La La Land. You can like Barbie and Anatomy of a Fall. You can like this film and that film. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. That's, art, it turns out, isn't sports.
Yeah. I could see other examples that we adopt in the future. Maybe given this current award season, we were talking a lot about Barbie and Anatomy of a Fall. I kind of envision a Venn diagram of both movies and say we like both in the middle or something like that. That's perfectly a fine thing. That's a fine thing.
Exactly. So, look, you can go and check out that shirt, and maybe we'll have more. I like Barbie, or maybe I'll just put I like blank and blank, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the next t-shirt, and then you can just write in the two movies, the two Oscar-nominated movies next to each other.
Put like a little white thing there that people can just write in there as what they want. Yeah, that's clever. That's clever.
So maybe that'll be the next t-shirt that we make in the spirit of all of this. But, we have other t-shirts. We got a Midnight Special t-shirt. We have, of course, InSession Film inspired t-shirts with our logos and stuff. We got Women in Session merch as well. Yeah. Whatever you want. So just go to InSessionFilm.com/store, or you can go straight to TeePublic, where our store is at TeePublic.com/store/InSessionFilm. Either way, you'll see all of our merch there. So again, that's InSessionFilm.com/store. You'll see all of the stuff we have there. It's really great. And of course, it really helps us out a lot.
Yeah.
In terms of funding this and the branding and the marketing, we would really appreciate it if you do that. So again, InSessionFilm.com/store. Okay. So I do want to talk about Best Director and how it sparked this insane discourse. Before we get to that, though, are there any other categories you guys want to mention here? Any craft categories you want to talk about real quick?
I'll get a little cynical for one moment. It's great that the Mission Impossible franchise is finally an Oscar-made franchise for best visual effects, but they nominate the worst-looking Mission Impossible movie, if you ask me. I think Dead Reckoning is a horrible-looking movie. I think like Fraser Taggart cinematography, I don't think gels well at all with the kinetic energy of that franchise. I don't think that movie works in a visual way like Fallout or Rogue Nation or any of the other films in that franchise do. So it's kind of unfortunate that it had to be that film, but I feel like I'm in the minority. A lot of people really did enjoy the spectacle of that movie. I didn't. That was the first time a Mission Impossible film as an action film did not impress me.
I was the same.
I
didn't like it. No, I gave
wow.
it like a 5 out of 10.
Wow,
Yeah,
I'm with you. I'm
Way
with
too
you on
long. It went on for freaking ever.
It is my least favorite MI film.
Wow, that's interesting because Brendan and I, when we reviewed it, I was very, very reserved on the film as well. I may come around on it depending on what part 2 looks like, even though
Part
it's not going to
2?
be called part 2. So who
Yeah,
knows?
so they announced, right, that it's now not part 1. They're taking that off the title, but
Taking that
then
off.
for the rest of time at the Oscars, it still says part 1.
Well, and still a lot of the Blu-rays out there still say part 1. I think if you go and rent it off of Amazon, it still says part 1. I think it's only if you're watching it on Paramount Plus, the premier streaming service that owns that film, it only says Dead Reckoning. But then, like, does it say that in the opening credits? Did they actually go back and change the opening credits for that movie?
It was a dumb idea to begin with.
Yeah,
it never should have been called
it's
part 1.
ridiculous. I don't know what they're doing there. Either way, I'm reserved on the film. I have some questions about it. We'll see how the next film might remedy those. Either way, I agree with you guys. The effects are not the greatest. Like the cinematography, the visual layout of the film is, I think, quite noticeably lesser than the others.
Yeah.
So I don't understand the praise there. I will say, though, for that category, I do, of course, love Godzilla -1 getting in. That was extremely exciting.
Same.
And even the creator. I don't love the creator, but one of its best elements is its visuals.
Right.
And what they were to some degree as well, because it didn't quite have as low as a Godzilla -1 budget, but it didn't have a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 budget either. I think it was, a $60 million budget?
It's a beautiful looking movie.
And it looks great. The visual effects are especially great.
Gareth Edwards needs to make a silent film. He really does. I think if the creator was a silent film, that would be a really interesting experience. I think he always gets bogged down in the wrong kind of storytelling.
Yeah.
Visual effects is actually a hard category to predict. You don't have a Dune part 2 to just be like, oh, that's obviously the winner here.
Yeah.
Like there's not a film here that's like in Best Picture or anything. So I'm like, I kind of want to say it's going to be Godzilla because it was such a small budget and the visual effects in that movie are spectacular.
Yeah.
But I'm like, are they going to pick a Godzilla movie to win an Oscar? I don't know. So
I mean,
I'm curious to see what happens.
It was a surprise hit, so maybe that narrative will help give it that trajectory, and I'd love to see it for that reason. I think just based on the visual effects themselves, the creator is probably the best one here. Based on that specific
might
artistry.
edge it out.
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a bigger kind of studio film that might help it.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah,
a little surprised that Napoleon gets in over Society of the Snow, and I say that because there was, from what I was reading anyway, there was quite some buzz surrounding the Bake Off and Society of the Snow there. So I was anticipating that. Clearly Napoleon also did well. I didn't read as much about that, but clearly it affected the voters enough that it gets in. But it's such a weird movie to think about in terms of visual effects. And maybe that's just appropriate to that movie because it is weirdly funny at times. So, just adding.
It's just weird. It's weird to think that like Napoleon got more Oscar nominations than Past Lives. It's like, really?
It's like I'm weirdly looking forward to that director's cut of Napoleon. I think there's
on Apple TV.
Yeah, I think there's a great movie in there somewhere. And JD and I talked about this a lot when we reviewed the film. It was actually a very short review because it almost felt incomplete. It was like a to be continued discussion.
That there's more to be released.
Yeah, but it really reminded me of Kingdom of Heaven, like how that film first came out as really just like a 2.5 hour trailer is basically what that movie was before the full movie actually came out later.
Yeah. Should we quickly talk about the writing categories real fast? I mean, I know that they don't mean much to, clearly the internet is like screenplay nominations. Get that out of my face. They're not important, but maybe we should talk about them.
What's interesting about the screenplay categories is that if they had called Barbie original and that had gone to original, that would have gotten nominated there, pushing out May, December, probably. And then in adapted, Killers of the Flower Moon would have made it. Yeah. So it would have been the 10 Best Picture nominees, all 10 films in screenplay.
Yeah.
So because of the Barbie adapted thing, we got one movie in there that's not in picture. And so May, December gets something, which is nice.
It's kind of twofold because on one hand, I feel like, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, Brian, I feel like I can argue Barbie more as an original screenplay than I can an adapted screenplay. And I was kind of hoping for that categorization to hold. But I understand the semantics of based on Mattel. So like, I kind of get it. But given this change, that is how you get something like May, December, Sammy Berger's work being represented there, which I think is genuinely warranted. Like, I'm so glad that she is represented there. So like, it's kind of like this twofold thing. On one hand, I don't know if I agree with the categorization of Barbie, but I also like how another film like May, December was able to get in because of that. So it's kind of like
a little bit of a double-edged sword in that regard. Yeah, because I agree. May, December getting in was very exciting. And while Killers misses, I would argue it probably still should have been in here. And the one I would put it over, I guess really there's two. I love the writing to Poor Things. I personally would probably put it in over Poor Things. But I do think there's also an argument to be made over The Zone of Interest. Which
I would take out Zone of Interest.
The Zone of Interest is a top 5 movie for me, but that is really more of a directorial achievement and a performance achievement than it is a writing one.
That's like nominating the script for Dunkirk.
Which makes no sense. Yeah. No, I agree. So The Zone of Interest is the one I would absolutely take out there.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, and that's not a knock on the film or anything like that, but it is in some ways... this word is certainly inaccurate, but it's the only word I can use to describe how that movie functions writing-wise. It is kind of scriptless at times. Like it is more about Glazer as a director and how it functions as a performance piece.
We know, because Glazer has talked about this, that he let the actors riff at times.
Yeah.
He just had these 12 cameras that he placed throughout that house and that whole area. And he said, go. And they made up some of it. I love the film, but
it also bums me out because this adapted screenplay would have been a great way to honor All of the Strangers with something. Andrew Haigh he just makes one masterpiece after another. He's made so many wonderful films. He's never been nominated before. He got really close this time, and that would have been great. Kind of like May, December, and original. All of the Strangers and adapted would have been fantastic.
And that's another great point, because if Killer still misses, but it's Andrew Haigh that gets in instead, I would have loved that.
Yeah, over Zone of Interest. That would have been cool.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been... I mean, that was my pick for adapted screenplay as well.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so good. So good. Okay, shall we get to director?
Let's get to director, because this is not going to ruffle any feathers.
No, I'm sure it's not. Do you guys want to go before I get on my box again? I'll let you guys take the floor first.
I mean, I'm very happy with that lineup. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I would love Celine Song to be there for Past Lives. And I mean, but like, this is pretty solid. Like, if you put in Greta Gerwig, that would have been great too. But who do you take out in that lineup? Like, there's no one there. Like, I think Glazer deserves to be there. It's an amazing directorial achievement what he did in Zone of Interest.
Yes,
he's also made terrific films before. He's never been nominated until this movie, so that's really cool.
Yeah,
and then so I can't imagine too many people. I mean, I guess they did at BAFTA. They took out Scorsese and Lanthimos at BAFTA in director, which was a surprise.
Yeah.
But Scorsese is such a legend. It's like he only makes a film every few years, and there are always these big epics, and it makes sense that he's here. And then I thought Poor Things was a visual feast that only could have been made by Lanthimos.
Sure.
So I'm happy he's there. And then Nolan's winning for Oppenheimer. It's his moment.
Yeah.
So I guess to get Gerwig in there, you'd have to take out Trier for Anatomy of a Fall, and that doesn't feel right either because she did an amazing job. So it's like I'm pretty happy with that line.
And that's a genuinely surprising nomination, and I like that it's here. And Best Director usually has at least one nominee that's like, oh, I did not see that coming.
Yeah.
Like when Bennett
Like
Miller
Cold
was
War.
nominated for, or Bennett Miller nominated for Moneyball, I think it was, or was it Foxcatcher? I think it was Foxcatcher actually. Like there's always that
Right.
one outlier that makes this category really interesting, but then further proves just how well directed so many of these movies are. Like I look at some of my favorite directing jobs of 2023, many of whom weren't even nominated, like Michael Mann for Ferrari, or Aki Kaurismäki for Fallen Leaves, Sean Durkin for The Iron Claw, Wim Wenders for Perfect Days. Heck, Chad
Wes
Stahelski
Anderson.
for John
Wes
Wick
Anderson.
Chapter 4, Wes Anderson,
Wes
for
Anderson.
Asteroid City. I mean, if you want to look at it as an achievement, a personal achievement, why not Hayao Miyazaki for The Boy and the Heron? Like that is very much a director making a movie about his legacy as a filmmaker. So in many ways, his direction is kind of part of that movie's success. So like the narrative of Greta Gerwig missing, I think that narrative is very unfortunate that people have felt the need to twist it this way when we are seeing female representation in this category. We're seeing not just female representation, we're seeing representation from people of different backgrounds, also with Justine Trier and Yorgos Lanthimos being a Greek filmmaker. So like there is pull from different cultural mindsets that should still be celebrated. And the fact that we're kind of forgetting about that because of this narrative that I know JD is going to get on the soapbox about, I'm just setting the stage for you, JD, so you have something to springboard off of.
I appreciate it.
But I do think it is very unfortunate because this crop of nominees, all of them are well-directed movies, and they should be celebrated for that.
No, this is an incredible crop of nominees. It is.
Yeah.
It really is. And it is unfortunate that the discourse has become what it is. And I think there are a couple of reasons to explain how it's manifested into this monstrosity. I think the first thing is that most of the people that are creating the discourse, they don't understand how the process works of how we get to these 5 nominees. And certainly the three of us do. We've talked about it many a times. Brian's articulated it very well on Chasing the Gold.
Yeah.
So we know how it gets to this, but you go out on the street and you ask people about it, they don't know. They don't know how the voting body works, and they especially don't know details such as the director's branch. They typically do not vote for these huge popcorn blockbuster movies or flat out comedies as Barbie tends to be. So Greta Gerwig missing simply from that perspective isn't much of a surprise.
Yeah.
But people
I never had her in.
Yeah.
I always thought she was going to miss.
they just don't know that. So that's part of it for sure. But the pot becomes stirred into this hornet's nest when you funnel it through the prism of turning art into sports, which is something we've talked about many times on this show. The Oscars at its core is a celebration of movies. That's what it should be. Yeah. Now, we do know because of the process, it's not a pure celebration. We know that there are politics involved. It gets personal. Looking at you, music branch. Gotta nominate John Williams. He's my buddy. I get it. Like
John Williams and Diane Warren, they should get together and go bowling or something.
So the process is a part of it, but also we have turned, and by we I mean the general public, we've turned the Oscars into sports. And the reaction, the way that people have approached the Oscars, it is no different. The behavior is the exact same as sports fans. It is. Yeah. It's the exact same. We have created fandoms. There's fandoms for Barbie. There's fandoms for Anatomy of a Fall. There's fandoms for Cillian Murphy. There's fandoms for Paul Giamatti. And when people get stuck in these fandoms, especially given how devoted the fandoms have become over, let's say, the last 10 or 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
That fandom creates fans. We all know what fans stands for. And that fanaticism has sparked this wildfire of conversation that lacks all perspective.
Fanaticism. That's a good word.
Nuance.
That's a good word for it.
And also, because I think about it, again, if we're going to correlate it to sports, and I very much do, when you're watching sports as a sports fan, you are devoted to your team. Okay. I'm a big college football guy. I'm a big Michigan football fan. And all Michigan fans, including myself, even when something like when Michigan is tested, we don't come at it and go, oh, well, screw our team. We're bad. No, you don't look. That's not what you do. You attack the other team. And so, having a conversation with rivals about sports on social media is an impossible task because you're going to defend your team at all costs. You're going to attack the other team at all costs. That's how it works. And that's how art has become. And, and so Barbie fans, how many Barbie fans, especially the fanatics, how many of them out there do you think have even seen Anatomy of a Fall? Probably not many. Probably not many. And so they're coming at this from a very myopic point of view.
Sure.
And I think the unfortunate side effect is that Justine Triet, who is very deserving to be here, isn't even given a chance to
enjoy it,
to enjoy it or defend her position because she's being attacked from, all of these angles. If they would just take the time to see the movie, they might understand, oh man, that's an incredible nomination. But that's not what happens. Like Michigan fans aren't just going to go out and praise an Ohio State fan for no reason. Like that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think personally that's how we should approach art. And to be fair to the Academy and to the Oscars themselves, I don't think they ever set out for it to become this. I think that's how people have just received it.
This is not the Academy. The blame is not on the Academy.
It's not on the Academy, and it's become amplified, just like sports fandoms. It's become amplified in the era of social media. So all of this toxicity gets amplified and elevated to an insane degree where perspective just lingers out there, and then we get messages like, Ken gets in for gets in a nomination, but Barbie doesn't, as if those two categories are competing for the same Oscar. They're not.
Yeah,
it's very, very different. And as Brian noted earlier, articulated beautifully, Justine Triet, very deserving to be here. Yeah. Scorsese. This era of Scorsese is arguably some of his very best work. What he does with Killers of the Flower Moon is remarkable. Oppenheimer, like this is Nolan's time. Absolutely agree. Poor Things, a visual feast, as Brian said. The Zone of Interest is the other directorial achievement of the year. If Oppenheimer didn't exist, there's an argument that Glazer should win this category. Mm-hmm. Like it's an astounding directorial achievement. Like this is an incredible 5. It's very good. And I love Gerwig. I really enjoyed Barbie a lot. I don't think like her missing, I don't think is really that big of a deal. Especially because she got nominated for writing, which is an also great nomination. Why are we undermining that?
Let's go back a little bit further, because my first thought was, okay, if Greta Gerwig has never been nominated for Best Director yet, then maybe I can see the point. But no, she was also nominated for Best Director for Lady Bird. So she has a Best Director nomination in her history. She's probably going to win at some point in her future. And she's a young filmmaker. She's 40, 41 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So there's going to be something that if her 3 films as a director are Lady Bird, Little Women, and Barbie, I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, all 3 were also nominated for Best Picture.
Exactly. Yeah.
And look, that's not to say that Gerwig should have been left out, or that I'm arguing that she should have. If she would have been in the 5, I would have celebrated that as well. But her missing, I don't think is really that. It's not the atrocity that it's being made out to be. because that is a great crop of 5. And also, as we've noted 1,000 times already, we don't have to undermine screenplay. Like, that is a great nomination to have. Sure, you can argue the semantics of is it original or adapted, for sure. But she still got the nomination. She was going to get in regardless for writing.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that she was able to do so. I'm glad that Margot got in for Best Picture. Why is that a bad nomination? Like, I don't understand it.
It could have been worse. Like, the movie could have missed picture, screenplay.
It still had a good
supporting actress. The only nomination it gets in the top 8 categories is Ryan Gosling.
If that were the case, then I would give some merit to the complaints, but that is not the case at all.
Yeah,
that's not what happened.
That's not what happened at all. It's still got 8 nominations on the day. We can celebrate that. We can have fun with the fact that it got those 8 nominations. Now, will it go empty-handed? Who knows? Maybe Brian can speak to some of the craft categories.
Yeah, I mean, some people are saying it's going to win screenplay for Gerwig and Baumbach, and kind of makes sense. I mean, I'm not sure, because I do think a lot of people look at it as an original screenplay. I wonder if that's actually going to hurt her, their chances to win in adapted. But they might want to give Barbie something big, and that is the one kind of top 8 category it could win. So that could happen, but I think Barbie's going to win at least 1 or 2, like probably original song it'll win.
I was going to say, it's certainly going to win original song, maybe production design.
Production design, I think it has a pretty good shot, and it's in costume design too. So.
Yeah.
I could see it winning costume, production design, original song, and then maybe screenplay.
Yeah. So it's and look, it's still got 8 nominations on the total. So like that's fine. That's great. A lot of films, a lot of great films this year did not get 8 nominations. Okay.
Yeah.
So like
Past Lives should have gotten into picture, director, actor, actress, supporting actor, screenplay, editing, score. But I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
And because guess what? You still have that movie. You can still love that movie.
Yeah,
right?
it's okay. Like, I was going to be severely disappointed if it just somehow missed entirely, did not get into screenplay or picture. I would have been like, really?
But you're not knocking or liking other films less for taking those categories or those nominations away from Past Lives. Like, you don't have that mindset, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm just happy it got in, especially picture. I was like, okay, it got into Best Picture. I'm happy.
Yeah. I do think, though, circling it back to my soapbox, because I'm still standing here, by the way. I have not stepped down.
You're like Elton John. You're still standing.
Because we have to lay down these fandoms. We do. We can have these passions. We can have these loves. I certainly have my loves and my passions, but I'm not pitting them up against each other in this fanatical way. I was having a conversation with our good friend Matt Neglia over at Next Best Picture, because that poor guy gets it so much worse than we do on social media.
Oh, yeah.
And he put out some predictions of his own. And I tell you what, the Cillian Murphy fans were relentless against him. Relentless. And again, it's the whole fanatical angle of it that limits their perspective on it. Yeah. Because predicting Paul Giamatti, who gave one of his very best performances of his career, I would go as far as to say the best performance of his career. Either way, it's great. And also, he's won awards. So like major precursors, he's won. So Matt, Brian, Ryan McQuaid, whoever, anyone that is predicting Paul Giamatti to win is doing it from two points of view as far as merit goes. One, it's a great performance, and he's won. Like, you're basing it off of evidence, genuine, objective evidence. But these people, they could not accept that. They could not wrap their minds around that fact. They just had to antagonize and villainize Matt, and that's the culture of the Oscars, or how it, at least the fandom of it all, how it's become this torturous experience. Yeah. That, again, verbatim of sports fans, And in the sports world, you somewhat anticipate that a little bit more because there are objective winners and losers there. And it's fun to antagonize your rivals when you know they objectively mathematically lose. Art doesn't work that way. It just very much doesn't. And we need to stop pitting these artists against each other and start embracing the celebration of it all, because that's what it should be about, and not, well, if Cillian Murphy loses, I'm making a bomb. I'm setting off my own bomb. Like it's become insane. Like it's insufferable, and it doesn't need to be. Can we please stop turning art into sports? It's not sport.
Yeah, it's like, because a lot of people feel like it's, for those that don't watch as many movies as we do and they don't live in this world as much as we do, by their favorites not winning awards, it's almost like something is invalidating their love and their appreciation for that film. It's a terrible mindset to get into, because it doesn't change the fact that the love of that film, or the love you have for that film, is gone. Like, the film still exists. It still exists. Some of the greatest movies ever made have never even gotten a single Oscar nomination.
Yeah, exactly.
That's something we haven't forgotten. In fact, some of these people who say these very things, some of their favorite films were never probably honored as much as that. So it just becomes a hypocritical statement by that point.
Yeah.
Some people you will just never please. You just have to move on. It's like, whatever.
It's fun to complain.
The problem, though, is those people have quadrupled. Like, they're everywhere. Like, there's way more of them than the reasonable people. And
I mean, I do a lot of predictions on my YouTube channel, and you'd be surprised. Like, I don't get a lot of hate. Like, I've predicted, like, in the last few weeks, like, you know, in the early days of the season, I was predicting Bradley Cooper might win stuff over Cillian Murphy. It wasn't like, 100 comments like,
it wasn't raising a red flag by doing
people
that.
would say, "Oh, I disagree. I think Murphy might win." But there wasn't like a lot of hate, which I guess. So I guess I've just I've been lucky. In that regard.
Maybe you've been lucky. And admittedly, we have as well. Like, most of the feedback we get on the show has been great.
Yeah,
we like, our listeners have been lovely. And, even when they've disagreed, it's all been very cordial.
Right.
And even on social media, it's not as if we've been, like, we don't get it like others do.
I've had more hate on social media, on Twitter.
Oh,
I have on my
because that's
like everyone has. That's where the bullies live.
But you just don't engage with it. I don't engage with it.
I don't either.
And to a degree, it probably is a vocal minority, to your point. However,
it's always the loudest person in the room.
But the conversation spreads, though. Like, it might start from a vocal minority place, but then it becomes this huge thing because those opinions become amplified. Like, they become shared by others that either are engaging in the same fandoms, or again, they just don't know how the process works. And so they get caught up in, okay, well, that thought makes sense. Even if something like Greta Gerwig missing for director, when you know how they vote, how the process works, that's not a surprise.
Yeah, Denis Villeneuve missed too for Dune.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, there's many examples. I think one that was brought up this last week was Nolan himself for Inception. Huge movie, huge directorial achievement. Dark Knight completely misses. So, like, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so when you don't have that information, it's easy to hear things that might agree with your ethos, not knowing that you don't have the full information.
Right.
And so then that starts to spread, and then it creates a conversation that just doesn't have any context whatsoever.
Right.
And then you throw in the whole fanatical angle of it, and then it just becomes this impassioned conversation that is obtuse on a level that is almost hard to articulate.
Who was it that tweeted? It may have been Matt Neglia that tweeted a GIF of the fight in the movie Barbie and said Barbie fans versus Anatomy of a Fall fans, and it just showed the Ken fight from that movie. It's like, wow, that's a pretty good analogy right there.
And that was very indicative of what was happening for sure.
Yeah.
And
see, I will never be on one side of it. Both Barbie and Anatomy of a Fall are in my top 10. I love them both. I'm never going to pick a side.
I only ever pick a side if someone like Sandra Bullock is going to win for The Blind Side.
Okay. she's my favorite actress.
I know. But okay, and
I don't really like that Oscar win, so you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, I love Sandra Bullock. I think if anything, she should have won for Gravity.
Gravity was the movie she should have won.
Yeah,
Yes.
but I mean, I think a performance like The Blind Side, it's like there are like 20 performances I probably could have said are better. Than
That was an award for her, not
Yeah,
the performance.
exactly.
I think that was like, we all love Sandra Bullock. Here's an opportunity. It wasn't a really like a super competitive Best Actress race that year.
Fair.
So it was like, well, she might never be nominated again. This is the year to reward the person.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened there.
Yeah,
and
that's
again,
fine.
that's a context.
Didn't mean to upset you, Brian. I was hoping
No.
because I saw you record. It's like, oh yeah, he does love Sandra. I know that. It's
Yeah,
Well, but that's
I've
the
always
thing,
loved
like,
her.
that happens often, right? We can
Yeah.
talk about the same thing with Scorsese in The Departed, not even close to his best film or best directorial achievement, but he wins there. Again, I will defend Leo, but I know I'm in a minority there. A lot of people feel the same about Leo in that same way.
yeah.
So like they do nominate, sometimes award for, outside reasons than just the singular performance or achievement, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But does the person on the street know that?
Yeah.
Not all of them. A lot of them
Yeah.
probably don't. And when they're missing that,
Yeah.
and then these things happen, they go crazy. And if
Yeah.
they're popular enough, if they're, I hate to use this term, if they're an influencer,
Then they have a voice. They have a voice.
When they have people that will listen to them, and they have these myopic perspectives that they can blast out there, people eat them up, and then they retweet them and they quote tweet them, and then it becomes what happened this last week with Anatomy of Fall and Barbie. And I
And
still,
that's
wish,
the thing.
sports betting just opened up here in Florida, which has been very exciting. I'm doing pretty well on my NHL parlays.
Nice work.
But if they were to open up a bet as far as how many of these Barbie fanatics have seen Anatomy of a Fall, I would put down a shit ton of money that they haven't. Like whatever the odds are, I don't even, who knows? But I would venture out to say that most of them probably haven't even seen Anatomy of a Fall. They don't even know
and
who
don't
Justine
want to see it.
Triet, and
But they don't even want to see it.
Exactly. Because I need Barbie to win. That's my team. Look, sometimes you have to accept the loss.
Exactly.
We're recording this when my Detroit Lions were playing in a pretty significant playoff game, and they lost tonight. And look, I'm not sitting here crying. I'm not complaining. They got to the NFC Championship game. That is equivalent of them getting 8 nominations Oscar morning. I'm thrilled. Okay,
Hey,
I'm
yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to
That-
be here
that-
and be all upset about it.
In a way, it kind of goes back to our point that Greta Gerwig is such a great talent. She's probably going to get a movie with 10 nominations next, which means maybe the Detroit Lions will make it to the Super Bowl next year, right? That's basically the same.
They might make it next time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's more reasons here to be happy than to create a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, unless there was a movie like at the level of Crash potentially going to win Best Picture, then it's okay to pick a side. But that's not what's happening here.
No, that's not what's happening in this case. And we somewhat talked about, I wouldn't go quite that far, but we dabbled in those waters a little bit with the Annette Bening thing. I don't think that's a deserved performance, especially when Robbie and others are sitting there.
Yeah.
So yes, there are times when that kind of conversation might be warranted. In this instance, it's definitely not. And I say that with all the love in my heart for Greta Gerwig. Absolutely adore her. Little Women and Lady Bird, respectively, were my favorite films in the years in which they came out. And I really liked Barbie. It was still in my top 20. I really liked the film quite a bit, but I don't know if it's a top 5 directorial achievement.
I'm with you.
Those 5 are deserving. They are.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I could see the relief in your face now, JD, that you're finally able to get that out of your system. Movies are a form of therapy, I guess.
Look, I've been looking forward to this because I didn't really say much on social media all week because no matter what you say, the other side is going to come at you with
You're in a
just
safe space here.
relentlessly.
You're in a safe space here.
Yeah. So like I had to be a little cathartic here because I think it's out of control.
And at the end of the day, Christopher Nolan is winning. So
Exactly.
what does it matter?
All of this means nothing anyway because Oppenheimer is going to rule the day.
It's going to rule.
Nolan's going to win.
Can I bring up a question? And I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of predictions because we'll probably have a separate conversation for that. But Oppenheimer has been nominated for 13 Oscars, if I'm not mistaken. How many of those do we think it's going to win? Like, do we think this could be another potential, like Ben-Hur or Titanic situation? I don't think so, but like it's been a while since that has happened with The Return of the King. So I was thinking about that if there was a possibility for that.
I think Oppenheimer will win around 6, maybe 7. Like it's not going to get like 2 or 3. It'll get a few, but it's not like it's going to probably win picture, director, supporting actor, maybe actor for Murphy. That's kind of up in the air right now. It's not winning screenplay. It's definitely winning cinematography,
editing,
score,
and probably editing and score for sure.
Yeah, so that
editing maybe could go to another movie, but cinematography and score are going to take it. And
so it sounds like 6 to 7 is probably
6 to 7. It's not going to be like 10 or 11, but it won't. But it's not. I mean, wouldn't that be weird if it just lost everything, but then it wins director and picture? That would be kind of weird.
That'd be fun.
So I think about 6 or 7.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to take home quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think we're all expecting that to some degree or another.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other thoughts on the Oscar nominations or the reactions thereof? Anything else you guys
I'm overall pretty happy with this list. There wasn't an inclusion that it was like, oh my God, that is a travesty. Like, especially in these top categories, I'm pretty happy. Even the Annette Bening nomination, people are hating on it. Like, I've always been a big fan of hers. I made a long video about her career last year, and she's done some wonderful performances throughout the years that did not get into the Oscars. Like 20th Century Women, she is incredible in that movie, and that was just overlooked. So it's like for her to get in for maybe a performance that's not quite at the level of some of her other stuff. I still thought she did a very good job in Nyad, so I'm okay with that.
Terrific actress, though. Terrific.
She's a great actress, a great woman. Like I'm okay with her being there, and I'm pretty happy with these nominations. Even though they were a little bit predictable, I would have liked a couple big surprises. Like a Zac Efron in The Iron Claw, like something that would have just made us go, what?
Yeah.
Like on Oscar nominations morning would have been cool.
Dominic Sessa for The Holdovers, maybe.
Yeah, I was hoping Sessa might make it, but a lot of these categories were just so stacked, it was hard to break in anywhere. So overall, I'm happy with this.
And that's why I can't get mad at people like Zac Efron or Dominic Sessa missing in their respective categories, because that was kind of expected. And it doesn't, diminish the quality of work that they're doing for their respective films. Or even someone like Rachel McAdams for Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. That would have been
I always thought she would get in somewhere along the way, and she never did.
Never did.
It was a really good performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And those were expected, although it would have been nice to see. But yeah, there is a lot to celebrate. And if there is a lot to feel, I guess, disappointed by, it's only representative of how strong the year was for film. And like I said in my opening, that's kind of a good problem to have in a weird way.
Yeah, no, I'm wholeheartedly there, and I do want to make that distinction. Again, have to be crystal clear, because who knows who might be watching or listening. It comes from a place of, it was such a great year, such a deep year for all of these films and performances and achievements, that something like John Williams or Annette Bening, I love them. Like my comments, my sentiments on their crafts of this year, it has nothing to do with them as performers, as artists, as much as it was such a great year that when they get in, it is a little deflating and a little disappointing. But on the whole, despite all of us strangers getting shut out, which really hurt my heart quite a bit, there is a lot to love here. I love Oppenheimer getting all of its nominations. We didn't really talk much about Daniel Brooks or Da'Vine Joy Randolph, but them getting in.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that Randolph was a shoo-in. I know there was some conversation about Daniel Brooks and The Color Purple on the whole, but like her getting in, I thought was absolutely phenomenal. Brendan, I know you mentioned earlier Lily Gladstone.
Yeah.
I want to echo that as well. You know, a great performance, her first Oscar nomination. I remember when you and I sat here and reviewed her in Certain Women. What was it, 2016?
And that was the performance of that year in some ways, or at
you
least
and
one of
I-
them.
you and I very much nominated, if not awarded her for what supporting actress or whatever it was that year.
Yep.
We were thrilled with her, and we were very excited to see where her career would go. And here we are with her being Oscar nominated and on the verge of maybe winning an Oscar, which is just incredible to think about. You know, Celine's song gets in for screenplay. I know Past Lives wasn't celebrated as much. It certainly didn't get the kind of nominations we would have hoped for, but her getting in for screenplay is still really great. You know, and Jeffrey Wright, of the actors, Jeffrey Wright getting in was also one of my favorite nominations. I know that he was maybe a front runner to get a nomination. It wasn't as much of a surprise, but he's so long overdue that for him to get in, it was still a thrill to see his name pop up there. So, and I just watched American Fiction again this last weekend.
Yeah.
He's terrific in that film. He's so good. I absolutely love him in that.
Yeah.
And even on a rewatch, like Sterling K. Brown wouldn't be in my personal 5 for supporting actor, but honestly, I really have no problem with that nomination, especially on a rewatch. He's delightful.
There's
really
something.
funny.
There is something so magnetic about Sterling K. Brown. I was not the biggest fan of a show like This Is Us, but I kept going back to it primarily because of Sterling K. Brown and his performance and just his presence. Like I always like what he brings, and that's I think he's really good for very similar reasons in something like American Fiction.
I know, and it's also interesting because, you know, a lot of the performances, clearly not all of them, but a lot of them tend to come from either this dramatic or emotional place. Of course, you have Ryan Gosling there. That's a very comedic performance. But Sterling K. Brown, that is what stands out to me about that character is how relentlessly hilarious he is in that film.
Yeah.
It's more of a comedic performance than it's not. But I also think of that moment when he's dancing with his mom and his reaction to that line, you know, about him being queer. That's a striking emotional moment in that film. And also this tender moment that he has with Jeffrey Wright there at the end.
Yeah.
When he talks to him about, you know, letting people love him, and he gives him a little kiss there. Incredible. Very tender, amazing moment. I very much love that performance much more on a rewatch. And I already was a fan of the performance to begin with. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. Pretty good on the whole.
Yeah.
I certainly have some that I'm frustrated by, but on the whole, this is a great crop, especially Best Picture. An elite crop of nominations.
It's a solid, it's a solid list. It's a solid list for sure.
Okay, with that, I think we can go ahead and wind down our Oscars conversation here.
Yeah.
So we'll say goodbye to our great friend Brian. Brian, thanks so much for being here, man. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is great.
Tell us where we can find your YouTube channel. Where can we find you on social media, my friend?
So my YouTube channel is called The Awards Contender. I make anywhere from like 1 to 4 videos a week, depending on how productive I'm being.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I'm most active on social media on Twitter. I'm at Mr. Brian Rowe. You can find me there as well.
Yeah.
All right.
And I just want to say that it's great talking to you, Brian. You're one of my favorite people to talk to in the film sphere. Our first conversation together on, what was it, Dalton Trumbo's Johnny Got a Gun? Johnny
That's
Got
right.
His Gun. Yeah.
On Film at 50. Yeah.
No, Film at 50. Yeah. That was a great conversation. I still go back to that every now and then. I thought
that was a passion project for me, Film at 50. I absolutely loved it. It was really hard to let it go, but I quit my teaching job to do my YouTube channel full time.
Oh, wow.
And I had to drop the podcast Film at 50. It was going to take up too much of each week, and I needed to just focus on the YouTube channel, and that's what I've been doing for almost a year now.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
good for you.
Killing it. Yeah.
Yeah, you really are.
Seeing your videos blow up on my feed. It's like, oh my God, he's doing so great over there. I love it. So.
Follow your dreams, everyone. Follow your dreams.
Absolutely.
Watch, tomorrow I'm going to quit my job now because of Brian.
Yeah, definitely go and give Brad a follow. Check him out on social media. You can also see his work at InSessionFilm.com as well.
Yeah.
So thanks, Brian, for being here. Really appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay, Brendan, before we get out of here, one other thing I wanted to bring up to you real quick, because it was noted that the new Doug Liman film, which is premiering, I think, at South by
Southwest. Yeah, that's where it's premiering. Roadhouse.
He is not going.
He's not going. He's protesting.
You know what? I'm not coming in protest because it is not going to theaters. It's going straight to Amazon, I believe it is.
Yes.
It was an MGM film, produced film, if I believe.
And Amazon bought MGM, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So
it is Amazon MGM, which is weird to say. Given
It
the
is.
history of that.
It's a really weird thing to say. Yeah.
But yes, so produced by Amazon MGM. So it was going to go to Amazon streaming. That's where that film is going to go. So in protest, because it's not getting a theatrical release, he said, you know what? I am not going, which I think is really interesting because it could perhaps have some sort of ripple effect on the industry if he is able to somehow get that film into theaters.
If the film is really good, Doug Liman himself says it might be among his best work. So we'll see about that. We'll see about that as we finally get the chance to see it. So I won't speak to the film's quality as of yet, obviously. But it is very interesting to see a director protest his own work. And given what Doug Liman has said, if the history here is true and the promises that were made to him when he was brought on, MGM is sort of known as this premier theatrical studio, with movies like the Rocky franchise and the James Bond franchise behind its belt. They have a history of that. And I think he had said that it was promised to him that this would be a theatrical experience. And that was one of the reasons why I think he wanted to make it. So if that is true and Amazon is essentially going back on their word, then I kind of sympathize with his choice to protest the film. And you're right. It is interesting because if this does have legs and other filmmakers start doing the same thing for their films that go to streaming instead of theaters, it could set a certain precedent. And of course, we always appreciate and value the theatrical experience, especially for a film that warrants the theatrical experience. And I don't know if Roadhouse will be a good movie, but given that trailer, it looks like something I would appreciate seeing on the big screen. Yeah. So I'm not going to say I support Doug Liman and maybe the way he's verbalizing it. I'm not saying I don't support it or even do support it. I'd rather see the film first to know for sure. But I do sympathize with him if those were the promises that were made initially and they got pulled away from him.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said the title there because I overlooked it, I believe, there in my opening. Yes, we are talking about the new Roadhouse film.
With Jake
Gyllenhaal. So, yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see if there are any ripple effects here. And maybe there won't be. Maybe MGM is laughing at the decision. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say we won't see Doug Liman on the press tour for this film.
Right.
If it continues to stream on Prime Video and it doesn't go to the theaters. But I am curious. I'm very curious to see if he's successful because if he is, I don't think this will be the last time we see this.
Yeah. I think you're right.
There's already a pushback with some producers, directors, artists against the whole streaming world. I mean, we know that there are some that embrace it. Others have perhaps an issue with it. Because I also think about the new Dev Patel film that released
Monkey
its
Man
trailer earlier in the week. And as part of the marketing push, it was also reported that Jordan Peele, because that film was initially sold to Netflix, I think, for something like $30 million. Maybe I'm over exaggerating the number there, but it was, a hefty number. And Jordan Peele decided, you know what, this is too good of a movie. It can't go to streaming. It needs to be in theaters. And that film is now going to theaters.
Yeah.
So there already is this pushback. And also, I can't remember the name of the film, but one of the films that was purchased at Sundance, I believe it was, right? Recently, some horror film that by all accounts was this crowd-pleasing horror film. Netflix bought it, and there was backlash against that because who doesn't want to see a crowd-pleasing, awesome horror film in theaters? If the film seems to have a theatrical ethos to it, of course it's going to be disappointing when you're just watching it at home on Netflix by yourself, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so it just seems as if there's like the tides might be changing a little bit. Streaming certainly isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
No.
But you kind of wonder if there's some sort of middle ground that might be bridged between streaming and going to theaters, if not just the artists, but if consumers want to see these movies in theaters as well before it goes to streaming.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think we sort of saw this narrative start when Dune got a sort of an exclusive Max streaming alongside its theatrical release. Now, it still got a theatrical release, but the fact that it was streaming on Max at the same time sort of undervalued its theatricality.
That was
right?
a COVID byproduct, though.
It was, but that was, it's still the narrative. I think maybe kind of started there for how big of a movie that Dune was. And then you have someone like Christopher Nolan who still made the push for theaters with a movie like Tenet. And of course, the film maybe didn't do so well due to COVID-related reasons, and that certainly makes sense. And that's why you're seeing Tenet make another theatrical push, kind of like right now as we're recording this. It's going to come out maybe this or next month. So I certainly sympathize with that. But yeah, you're right. There are certain films that directors have this theatrical tie to, that they want to see it experienced in a certain way. And if those promises were made and they get ripped away from them, I don't blame them for being upset. I'll simply say that.
I agree. And you have to wonder, and I don't give Disney a lot of credit often, but because it fits into this conversation here, you do have to maybe give them a little bit of kudos, because similarly, they had movies come out over the last few years, particularly in 2020, 2021, that went straight to streaming because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
They didn't really have an opportunity to go to theaters. But now that we are quite on the other side of that, they are re-releasing Soul, Turning Red, Luca. They are going into theaters for the first time this month, and I think into next month as well.
Yeah.
So, props to them for doing that. They didn't have to do that. I, for one, am very excited. I
can't wait to see Luca on the big screen.
I want to take Sam to see Luca in theaters. Yeah.
I think I may have missed my chance, but if there was one I really wanted to see in theaters, it's Soul, because that's a movie I want to love more than I do. And maybe the theatrical experience would make it better for me, but like that's a movie I'm still kind of mixed on.
I agree. Yeah, I'm with you there. And who knows? To your point, maybe the theatrical setting could help elevate that experience a little bit. I don't know if it'll solve the narrative issues I have with it, but
probably not. But as a sensory experience, it might make it better.
Yeah. Either way, I'm dying to see Luca in theaters. I think that'll be a lot of fun. So,
I'll be taking my wife because we both love that movie.
So I'm very excited that they're doing that, and maybe, although I would assume they've been planning this for a while, but it does time up nicely to this stretch of films, or films that have fallen into this issue in recent weeks. It does make that timely. So
absolutely.
At any rate, very excited
it is interesting.
to see. Yeah, very interesting. Very excited to see what the whole Doug Liman thing turns out to be. So,
yeah.
If that does get into theaters, who knows? We shall see.
Maybe he'll get his way. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. All right. With that, I think we'll go ahead and wind down the show.
I think we're good.
We talked quite a bit about the Oscars, turning art into sports. Please, let's stop doing that. It's art. It's not sports. The behavior doesn't have to be sports. It is right now, but we can change that. We'll, try to change this into an optimistic thing. It's okay to be open-minded. It's okay to like two things at once.
Yeah.
It was so funny. I certainly did it in jest, but, I threw out there, I like Barbie and Anatomy of a Fall.
Make up your mind, dude. Make
I
up your
know.
mind.
I hate that we live in a world where I have to choose between, like, God forbid I like both Cillian Murphy and Paul Giamatti. Oh my God.
No, make up your mind, dude.
I know.
Oh gosh,
Ridiculous.
what a weird world.
It is. But
Yeah.
that is to say, had a lot of fun talking with Brian.
Oh,
This was
absolutely.
a great show. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say, we would love to know your thoughts. Please hit us up. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment below. You can reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Please hit us up. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate and review us there. We would love to get your feedback. Really helps out the show when you do that. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that fun stuff as well. And you can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Please check out the latest Women in Session episode as well. It was really great. And as I noted earlier, we have reviews of Robot Dreams and Perfect Days out. You can go and check that out. Had a really fun conversation
great.
with Brennan on those two films.
Great
It was
movies.
fantastic. And I think we're going to try to have out a few more this week as well. So we'll work out a schedule, find a time to do that. I believe this week we're talking the documentary Four Daughters.
I think we talked about Four Daughters and A Fire, the new Christian
Fire,
Petzold film, as ones we want to try and lump in here. And yeah, we're not sure when we'll do that, but it should hopefully be sometime this week.
Yeah, so be on the lookout for that. We'll try to get some more Patreon content out as well.
Yep.
So please be on the lookout there. Subscribe to Patreon, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. Thank you to all of our patrons. You really do help out the show a lot. So thank you to those that do that. I think with that, we can wind down. Any final thoughts, Brendan, before we get out of here?
I'm just sorry for your lines, JD. I really am.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I was pulling for them. They were the ones I was really pulling for, just given the narrative as the quote-unquote underdog of the last remaining teams here. And now knowing who we have in the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Niners, I'm not rooting for anyone at this point. I'm kind of apathetic to it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. I am a little saddened by the loss, but, you know, it's one of those things because Dan Campbell, the coach of the Lions, you have to learn to live with his aggressiveness. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, and he's extremely aggressive. And a lot of the times it pays off. As we saw tonight, it did not. And, you know, it makes you wonder if you can find a middle ground with him. Because to me, it's not even that we lost. It's how we lost. You know,
exactly.
You're up, 17 points at halftime or 14 points, something to that effect.
It was 24-7, I think, for much of that first half.
Yeah. So you're up and you have a chance to, you know, go up 27-10, I believe. So you have an opportunity to go back up by 17 points on a relatively easy, makeable field goal.
Yeah.
But he decides not to. He goes for it on 4th and 2. It does not work out. And the next thing you know, you've lost all the momentum. And the 49ers score a touchdown. They get the ball right back. They score a touchdown again. And they just never recovered from that. And even later on in the game, they were down by 3, had a chance to tie the game with a field goal. Again, makeable. It wasn't an extremely long field goal. They go for it on 4th down instead of kicking the field goal, and they don't get it. Like, it just doesn't make sense from a conventional coaching mentality perspective. But that, again, that's not Dan Campbell. And, you know, it's one of those things where if he goes for it on 4th down and they make those plays, he's a hero.
Yeah.
But because they failed tonight, you have to question it. And I do.
You do.
And to me, that's what's disappointing. It's not even that they lost. It's how they did it.
Yeah.
These were preventable mistakes.
They were. They really were. And that's what made it more unfortunate. I will say the game before that, watching the Ravens and Chiefs, that was kind of fun at times. That one, I don't know if you watched that game at all, but there was
a little bit, yeah.
There was one moment where Zay Flowers from the Ravens got penalized for taunting in a very bad way, and then only like 2 plays later fumbles the ball in their own end zone. It's like, well, karma's a bitch, man. Karma's a bitch.
Yeah. I mean, sports is all about momentum, And you can create your own momentum, and sometimes you let karma get the best of you.
Yeah.
And that was the case of the Lions tonight, too.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, you play with fire, sometimes you get burned. And
Yep. That's what happened.
you know, if the Lions go up 27-10 halfway through the third quarter, do you really think that game plays out the way it did tonight?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think that
I don't know.
I think that completely changes the momentum of it. It's kind of like the butterfly effect, right? Like I think it changes the way that the game is going to go, just like psychologically speaking. It completely changes that.
Because you're talking about a 10-point swing.
Yeah.
You go up 17 points, that is 3 scores.
Yeah.
And you're halfway through the third quarter. So time is a factor for you. And if you can run the ball, which we know the Lions can, just keep running the ball. Like, the math is there. Like, it just doesn't make sense to go for it. Like, even, and you know me, I'm a proponent of advanced analytics.
Right.
You know, I love it. And I haven't done any research. I don't know what the analytics would have said in that exact situation. Maybe in a microcosm of 4th and 2, maybe you do go for it there. Maybe that's what the analytics say. But I also think about it from a broad perspective, because if you go up by 17 points, they have to score 3 times.
Yeah.
The time is on your side there. It just
take advantage.
Again, these are preventable, like easy coaching things that you know, just it was the how tonight.
It was.
It's not even that they
really
lost. It was the how.
It's the how. Yeah, and in fact, it could have been preventable.
At any rate, with all of that said, it was still a great season.
Yeah.
Just like it was a great year for movies.
It was. Yeah. Nice way to bring that around. Good job.
Yeah. So much to celebrate, more than to be sad about. So
yeah. Well said.
At any
well
rate,
said.
thanks, Brian, for being here once again. Thanks for listening, watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. I love Greta Gerwig. Love Margot.
She's still good.
Screenplay nomination, good still. That's a great nom.
Writing's important.